Hello everyone, this is Melanie and I'm here again today from Melanie B's Creative Studio with a painting that looks really familiar, doesn't it? So I brought you this same painting a few weeks ago in a Schipper Sunday, and you might be wondering, why am I bringing it to you again? Well, this time I'm not bringing it to you to unbox or review or go through the swatch of the paints. I'm actually going to show you a new method for adding clear gesso to a Schipper surface. I have come up with a new product that I feel like is even better than the little silicone sponge that I had brought to you last year sometime. And there's a couple reasons that I basically invented my own. I'm also going to be using a different gesso. I just recently did a very extensive clear gesso video where I compared a lot of different clear gessos. Now I'm going to go ahead and throw in a disclaimer right here somewhere that says Schipper paintings don't need clear gesso if you are not comfortable doing that, okay? These are board paintings. They're paint by number kits that are on a board, and I'm going to go ahead and pull that out and show you what I mean. So give me just a second and let me get this out, and we're going to talk about the difference between a canvas and a board painting kit. So because this is a paint by number that is on a board surface, and I do realize I've discussed all of this in Schipper videos long ago, but I'm going to briefly just mention this. Schipper board paintings are on a much thicker type of board than any other brand of board paintings. So that is why this particular brand is the only one you will ever find me adding clear gesso to. I will not add clear gesso to any other board paintings, even if they need it, because they are not quality enough to add a liquid without it warping or damaging the board. Now, having said that, the only reason I add clear gesso to a Schipper paint by number is because I personally like a little more of a matte texture or a toothy texture on my surface. That is my personal choice. Many of you choose not to add clear gesso to your Schipper surfaces, and that is just your personal choice. As I've said in prior videos, you do you, boo-boo. It is up to you. But for those of you who are interested, otherwise you would not be watching this video right now if you weren't interested, you might want to see the least invasive way of applying it to the surface and without, creating any damage. When I add clear gesso to a Schipper board, as it's drying, I will notice a little bit of bowing potentially, but after it dries, I will place it face down on a clean surface, and I will place the box on top, and that will put it back completely flat. After it's been completed and it goes into a frame, you will not see any of that again. I also use such a light application of clear gesso that I'm not adding so much liquid that it's saturating and going through this board to where it's really creating a problem. It is completely normal to see some warping in a board type of painting. Now these are really nicely flat, but even occasionally you can get a board painting, whether it be Schipper, Dimensions, or whatever, and humidity in the air can cause some slight warping in your board. If you live in a humid environment like I do, it can cause there to be some warping as you're working on a project, whether it's been gessoed or not. So over time, if that becomes something that concerns you, all I do is place it face down and put some of my Schipper boxes on top or whatnot, and it will just put it right back the way it needs to be. I wanted to go ahead and mention as well that if you guys remember when I did Schipper Sunday for this particular painting, I had mentioned that the paints had spilled. I had put in a request through customer service for a replacement painting kit. And so I wanted to point out that I had received this, and although I have not opened it yet, I wanted to do so for us today. I didn't email them privately or anything. I just put it in on their replacement request form. And so I'm gonna open this up, and it looks like even though I only requested the 1 or 2 strips, they sent me an entire paint kit for this particular painting. So I'm super impressed with that. I did not expect an entire kit. That's fabulous, but that is how Schipper's customer service is. So fantastic. I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. Again, I hadn't even opened this yet. That is a surprise to me. I thought there was gonna be 2 strips in here. So amazing, amazing customer service. So let me show you what we're gonna be using today as far as what we're gonna gesso the surface with. I have a brand new little tool, and it looks very tiny right now. So let's zoom in a little bit. I haven't even taken it out of its plastic. This is something that just came in today, and I've been waiting on it for a little while. It is a rubber silicone flexible squeegee, and the reason it works so well is because if you notice, it's got this little slant to it. It is 2.64 inches in width. And for a lot of people, they like to use like a credit card or a debit card, a gift card or something like that. But this is more flexible, and it allows us to really, I use it this way actually, push down into the grooves and the divots, the surface of our canvas or our board, and get the gesso down in it. And so it gives us a nice smooth application and allows us to really get a really pretty application the first time. There are no brush strokes with this tool, which again is a perk. And this is a very affordable little must-have as far as I'm concerned. I actually created it because I knew it was going to be a must-have tool. Now, the reason I decided to do this instead of the silicone sponge that I had shown you last year was because I had such a difficult time finding the larger silicone sponge, and this was so much easier to hold and maneuver and manipulate than that Silisponge. The Silisponge was so thick, I couldn't get it to bend like I wanted it to, and this does. And it was just so expensive. So you're looking at like an $11 item for the Silisponge. So there's a big difference in price for this. And I feel like you're gonna like this better as far as its ability to apply and hold, and just, I think everything about it, I think you're gonna like. I'm not gonna waste my time developing something for us that is not going to be useful. The other thing that I'm gonna be using is clear gesso. This is the Art Basics brand. Even though I really like the Liquitex as well, this does not give that gritty texture. And I feel like for a Schipper and its gentle surface, this was a beautiful finish without that gritty feeling. Because this comes in a jar, I'm gonna be dipping into the jar with the squeegee to apply. Now, one of the things I didn't really mention, the cleanup for the squeegee is a breeze, which was one of the beauties of having it. You can actually just rinse this off with warm water or whatever, and it comes off beautifully. The other thing is you can scrape off any excess back into the container. You don't waste anything. The only other tool I will get is a damp paper towel. I also like to put down like a silicone mat or something underneath what I'm working on to protect the surface below my canvas or the board while I'm putting on the clear gesso. Before I go into time lapse, I'm gonna go ahead and take what's in the lid and use it as much as possible. So I'm gonna get some gesso on my squeegee and just start applying it. Now, do you see how fast this is drying? And of course, I'm working in a room that feels like a sauna right now. It is hotter than hell. And you know what? I don't want to know what hell really feels like. But it is really hot in this room. I mean, like, it's probably 70 degrees, and for me that's super hot. But it's drying really fast. Now I'm going to take the leftover gesso that's on the squeegee, and I'm just going to wipe it off on the side of my jar and get like 90% of that off. And then I have a damp paper towel here that normally I would just go rinse this off in the bathroom, but I'm about to use this again. See, that's how easy the cleanup is. So the main reason that I wanted to apply the gesso to a Schipper surface, and I'm not sure I mentioned it in the beginning, is not necessarily to make my paint more opaque. It's because their surface has like a ridge like this, and I want that to be smooth. So that when I'm painting, whether I'm doing the paint by number flow technique that I just introduced you to in the last few weeks, or if I'm doing a regular method where I'm just filling in the cells as I normally would, that I don't have wonky outlines. And that texture, although it's beautiful and it still shows through whether I have gesso or not, it doesn't affect my outlines if I have clear gesso. So it gives me that really smooth surface, and that's what I'm using the clear gesso for. I thought while I was waiting for this to dry that I would show you the difference between the ungessoed panel and the gessoed panel. This is just with one layer of gesso, one coat, and you can see the texture of this surface without any gesso on it. And I love the look of the texture, so I don't want people to misunderstand and think that I don't love the way that looks. You still see it in the finished piece. So even though I put down a layer of clear gesso, I'm not eliminating that visual look of the texture. Clear gesso just allows me to get a smooth surface and paint on a surface that doesn't allow the paint to go down into those grooves. So here, if you can see the difference from here to here, you can see this texture's got more grooves. Over here, it looks more smooth. And I think this is the best way to see it while I'm waiting. Like, that is very clear. So feeling it, I'm thinking I'm definitely gonna do a second layer just to test that out. One might be enough, but just to be sure I've got a really even layer, I'm gonna go ahead and do two to be sure if I missed any little gaps or whatever, then I'm filling it in with the second layer. And so I will be back in just a moment. Since I applied and let everything dry, you'll notice that I have some little paint swatches on the actual board itself. So what I had done is I decided to test the panels in different states of gesso. So let's go to the ungessoed surface and take a look at the way this looks when it is ungessoed with no primer at all. I didn't have even coverage. It wasn't necessarily streaky. It was just thinner in some spots and thicker in the others. When I did one layer of Art Basics gesso, I painted a layer and I was not thrilled. And I went back over it with another layer, and I went back over with another layer, and I was like, oh, this is not doing what I expected. So I ended up doing the flow method, and I was fine with that. But I was like, the whole point of me putting down the gesso was to be able to paint it in the normal fashion. So what I decided to do with this was to add a coat of the Liquitex gesso that I normally use with the Squeegee. So I applied it just like I did in the close-up video with the Art Basics gesso, and it went on beautifully. I had beautiful even coverage, and I have the sandpaper texture that most of you do not like. But once I went back and I checked the coverage, it was gorgeous. And it was just perfect, and I didn't have to do a second layer or a third layer, and my paintbrush wasn't moving around. Now I'm just going to mention, you would only need one layer of the Liquitex gesso. And applying it with the Squeegee was pretty much the magic solution because it didn't leave brush strokes, it got down into the grooves, and it gave me a really smooth top layer with one coat of the Liquitex. And I don't think there would ever be a need for a second layer of the Liquitex. So for those of you who are nervous about applying Liquitex gesso to your Schipper painting boards, I don't think you're going to have any future issues with it as long as you're using something like the silicone Squeegee, because this is such a gentle application tool. Now let me show you the panel that has Art Basics gesso, because even though from where you're looking it does look pretty good, it took me 2 layers and a lot of care and effort to get it looking that way. This panel has 2 layers of the Art Basics matte gesso. So you can hear the difference. It's not rough, it's just a matte finish versus the toothy surface of the Liquitex versus the original surface of the no prepped board. The tooth of the Liquitex has definitely been very helpful versus the tooth of the matte finish versus the no prep at all. But let me do the test for you to sit and watch and see the difference in the application process of me applying the paint to each panel with the different gessos or without the gesso, and see if you can tell what I'm saying when I say why it's important to pick the right gesso for the proper surface. So let me get in really close with a different camera and let me show you what I'm talking about. Now this is the ungessoed panel, and I went into the new set of paints that Schipper sent me because there has been nothing added to these paints, because I wanted to make sure that I was testing the paint with no additives. Now I'm going to just go into one of these number 24 cells and let's test this surface against those other 2 gessoed surfaces and see if we see any difference. The only thing I really notice is that I'm having to do extra work just to make sure I'm filling in, you know, the texture and the ridges, and I'm having to add extra paint to make sure I'm getting an even layer. And so I'm gonna put this panel aside and I'm going to grab the next panel that has the Art Basics gesso with the matte finish, so that we can compare that one to this one. Now this is the panel with the Art Basics gesso with the matte finish with 2 layers, same brush here. And this is what I thought was odd. Oops. Not the fact that I'm way out of the lines here. Talking and chewing gum. It's not my forte. See how it's smoothing and it's getting thinner? I thought that was strange because I tested Art Basics extensively along with a lot of other clear gessos in a recent video where I compared all of these gessos. And this gesso was a favorite on canvases and the canvas texture And I'm super shocked that when I'm applying it, I'm getting that really weird, like first layer transparency. And I'm having to come back and kind of overcoat it. But as I'm overcoating it, I'm getting really good second layer opacity, which is so weird. But I love the finish of this as I'm painting it. Like, it feels good to paint on, and it doesn't have it has a really smooth texture to paint on. So it's not making me feel like I'm going over, you know, doom, 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 like speed bumps, if that makes sense. It's just a really smooth finish, but as I'm applying it, it gets real transparent. And then as I go over and smooth, it's like this beautiful coverage. It's just a very weird, I don't know, it's a hard thing to explain. So I'm hoping it shows up in the camera as I'm painting. But when it's done, the opacity is fabulous and the finish looks really good. Now, other than the fact that I need to hold it in the light because this room is a sauna and the paint is drying so fast. Make sure my stroke marks are gone. But yeah, I hope you can see it's just a really smooth finish. And even though you can see the texture of the board, I don't feel it when I'm painting, and I'm getting really nice, you know, outlines. So very strange. All right, let's move to the Liquitex clear gessoed panel and let's compare it, and we'll do our final analysis. All right, so this is the Liquitex prepped panel. I'm going to tell you what I've learned from this 2-day recording session of this video, and what you're not seeing because it's behind the scenes. The more tooth you have, the better you're going to get coverage the first time without overstroking and double layering and that kind of thing. The better the final look is. Let me see if I can do this without my camera acting like it doesn't want to focus. See how pretty that is without a bunch of streaks and strokes and stuff? It's just really beautiful. And I'm super happy. And I originally thought that I was going to love the matte finish gesso, but I'm really disappointed that I don't, honestly, that the tooth that drives everybody crazy is what I like the best. Because I was kind of hoping to get away from that tooth because the tooth can, you know, fray brushes and whatever. Now my new brush cleaning system will help prevent that. But at the same time, I was hoping that because this is a toothy texture, I could help you avoid using it in the future so you didn't feel intimidated by putting it onto a paper surface with your shipper. But you guys, I have to be honest. After testing 10 different gessos recently and thinking that I would give us a solution by using this, our basics one without the tooth is the key. And doing this demonstration has helped me see that. Now I do want to do the demonstration using the PBN flow technique so that I can see if the clear gesso helps. So is it worth, you know, putting the clear gesso on if you're going to do the PBN flow technique? Is it going to help reduce the little bumpy outside, you know, edge lines and whatnot? If it's not, then it's not worth it. But if it is, you know, it would be worth it to me because I want my outside lines here to be straight if possible. So I'm going to grab my other paint that already had flow aid in it and we're going to test it. So I have been loving the 2/0 Melanie B spotter brush from the mini detail set. And so this is the one I've been using a lot for it. And I'm just gonna go in with this little cell right here and do it really quickly and see if I can tell a difference. Now I would probably prefer to thin that out a little bit, but for right now I'm just gonna go in with this. I got a little blob on here, and so I'm gonna take the blob and put it in the middle, outline. Try not to get my hand in the way. I do like to hold my hand more vertically when I'm doing this, but I don't want to get my hand in front of the camera. I wouldn't have to dip so much if it was a little thinner. I like it to be more three-dimensional, and when I thin it just a little bit more, it gives me more of that lift and texture, and it uses less paint, and it's a little easier to fill in with. But anyway, so I don't see any of the little ripply outlines because of the gesso, but I think that is going to be a test that I would have to paint this entire canvas to really determine in the future. Maybe I need to find a straight line like this one. Here is more of a straight line. Let me test that one. This video is going to be 185 hours. Of course, if my hands weren't shaking like I'm detoxing or something. See how that line looks straight? Because the surface of the texture on the canvas isn't causing it to look wonky, because the clear gesso made my surface flat. Boop, boop, boop. Yeah, that was a good test. So let me show you what I mean. Right here, that line is straight because the little ripples and the lines and the texture of the surface aren't making it go boom, 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 boom. So I will probably continue to clear gesso my Schipper boards. Well, everyone, I hope this video has helped you kind of lead you in the right direction about clear gessos and how to apply them to your Schipper board if you choose to do so, whether you even want to do so. And I feel like this tool is the right tool for applying it if you're going to do it. So I hope this has been super helpful for you today and informative. Be sure to join me on Patreon and on the Facebook group and all of my other social media. That information is at the very bottom of the description below. If you just scroll all the way down, you'll find it. Thanks as always for watching, and I will see you back soon.